Y'all may recognize this fine crafter designs from some of my previous videos or from some other YouTubers. Well, it pulses twice every time it fires because when the crafter goes up to 9, the observer fires, and then when it goes back down to 8, the crafter fires once again. And my challenge today is to see if I could go ahead and take that down to 1 pulse on this output crafter. So just to go ahead and show you guys what happens, I'm gonna go ahead and put 9 redstone dust into this crafter, and you'll notice there's that second redstone pulse. That's what we're trying. And this is brought to you guys again by the comments. Someone mentioned this, and I just thought, why not make a video out of it? It might be fun. Here are the rules for the challenge. I have to keep the T formed from the comparator, dust comparator, and then the downward facing observer. Yes, the downward facing observer is a requirement. The second rule is I have to keep a downward facing crafter as the output going into some kind of storage or a hopper or something like that, but it has to be something that's getting powered, and preferably it gets powered from that block. And then a, not necessarily a rule, but like a preference was that you could take a hopper output from whatever storage was available. I went ahead and made a bunch of designs, just trial and error, and wanted to showcase each one of them and kind of my thought process through each one. So first off was this design, which was a complete flop, but it did take into consideration, well, all I really need here is a little bit of memory to prevent it from firing on the downward part of the pulse. That sounds like a good idea. And so I used the copper bulb. What this really did was it resulted in, one, it not actually firing because it's not connected to the barrel, but also it would actually result in 4 different pulses, because what would happen is this would power the bulb, which would fire this second observer. The bulb would go unpowered, which would fire the observer again. And then when you do that same cycle to turn it off, it also would power a total of 2 times. So you get 4 pulses. So I decided to go over here and just think through the top facing design of different ways we could maybe accomplish this for a little bit. And so you have first off, you have the traditional design. This one still does 2 pulses. And then this design right here actually does 1. So this is kind of like a little bonus for y'all today, but this is where you would do it if you wanted it facing the top, and we're willing to use pistons in a slime block. I'm not too certain that this design is optimized, but it definitely did make this 100% possible. Okay, so now we go to the next design where I tried to just use a repeater to extend the pulse to allow the crafter to only fire once. Sadly, this didn't actually work as intended. If I go ahead and put in 9 redstone dust, what would happen is that this dust would power up, but it was long enough that a full-length repeater would not be able to cover it. But an important part of the design that I did realize was going to be necessary was adding this block in between the output crafter and the comparator reading from it. This is really required because we just need enough space. It's not really a requirement or rule or whatever. It's just we need the space to do it. Now, this design did get me really close. And so that's where we result in the first design that really does a single pulse operation, but it has a couple issues. I'll hit on that. But let me show you guys how it works. So it will go ahead and feed the 9 redstone dust into that guy. That powers, triggering this bulb. And basically this guy only outputs when the bulb is on. That results in it only being powered as long as the bulb powers on. So when this turns off, bulb turns off, unpowers the crafter. Kind of an extended pulse design. There are a couple issues I have with it. Really only one, and that's that it can't be tiled. This dust right here, if I were to place another one of these, well, that would become a line. I could add something to maybe force this barrel to connect it to it. But honestly, I would rather have a design that tiles. So I went back to the drawing board and thought, hey, pistons would tile. So I made up this design. This is 100% a working design, but it's horribly unoptimized. So what happens here is same as usual, powers up at 9. And then my thought process was this observer fires, which makes this observer fire, goes into this copper bulb. That fires this guy, which fires this sticky piston array. And if we feed our 9 redstone dust in, it will fire once, and that is all. But not perfect, and definitely not something I wanted to use. So this is the final design, and this is the one I loved a lot. It really does actually do what's intended, and it takes advantage of a redstone single tick upward pulse, or it turns on the upward tick. It's early morning when I'm recording this, so I know there's a technical term for it. I do apologize. But what happens here is this will fire, and then this guy will fire, forcing this piston to go up, and that will have this observer fire on this barrel, firing the crafter. When this turns off, the piston comes down, and we're good to go. But because of how it's designed, it also doesn't power the blocks beside it. That's actually why I have this little kind of like quarter system down here at the bottom. So when I put some redstone dust in here, it will go ahead and fire, and then you'll notice it goes right back down and didn't fire this other. So this is really the design I would suggest you using if you want this single pulse design. I haven't found any practical uses for it yet, but I'm very certain there will be practical uses for it soon. And of course, you do have this secondary design if you are wanting it just as a one-off and don't want to use a piston. Maybe later on, we'll have to explore finding a solution to the same problem that doesn't use a piston and is still tileable. But for now, this is how it's gonna work. And make sure to support me on Ko-fi. This is Naked Light, signing out. God bless y'all. Make sure to leave in the comments, 1, a challenge, and 2, make sure to subscribe so that you guys can see it in the next one.